pessoas. O número de inscritos é ligeiramente superior ao número de lugares na sala. Portanto, houve overbooking. Portanto, agradeço que não deixem buracos no meio. Obrigado. Bom dia, bem-vindos. Como viram, fazemos 30 anos. Em 30 anos, muita coisa evoluiu no setor elétrico em Portugal. Em 1988, consumíamos 21 terawatts-hora. No final de 2017, esse valor aumentou 2,5 vezes para 51 terawatts. A renovável, em 88, representava 50%, 10 terawatts. Em 2017, 58%, 28 terawatts-hora. A potência renovável instalada eram 3.342 megawatts, dos quais a grande hídrica eram 3.250, 89 na pequena hídrica e 0,27 na eólica. Solar, biomassa e geotermia era 0. Atualmente, a potência renovável instalada aumentou por 4 vezes, 13.324. A grande hídrica duplicou para 6.461. A pequena hídrica para 3.374. A eólica, 5.266. A solar, 463 megawatts. A biomassa, 729. A geotermia, 29. A chamada renovável PRE, excluindo a grande hídrica, representava 1% do consumo nacional. Agora representa 30% do consumo nacional. Enquanto que, quando nós aumentamos de 10 terawatts-hora para 28 terawatts-hora em 30 anos, aumentamos uma média de 0,6 terawatts-hora por ano. Retenham este número. Vou voltar a ele. É muito importante. É muito importante nós termos a potência instalada, porque sem ela não podemos gerar eletricidade. Mas aquilo que importa para comparar, aquilo que nós temos para cumprir de metas, não é a potência instalada, é a energia elétrica que se gera. Esse é que é o elemento a comparar. Como todos sabem, a APREN representa todas as tecnologias da geração de eletricidade renovável. Não nos importa definir se há mais megawatts desta ou daquela. Nós temos um objetivo, que é o de ter eletricidade renovável cada vez mais presente. Mas fizemos mais. Criámos um cluster industrial e um grande impacto na economia. As empresas das energias renováveis investiram nos últimos 30 anos em Portugal 10 mil milhões de euros. 10 mil milhões de euros que são investimentos privados. Houve um concurso internacional para a atribuição de potência eólica em 2005, que é um dos melhores exemplos nas práticas internacionais. Permitiu viabilizar 2 clusters industriais de excelência, a Enercon e a Sembion, que criaram mais de 4 mil novos empregos diretos, disponibilizando hoje em dia máquinas industriais de elevada qualidade e a preços competitivos. O setor renovável de 2010 a 2017 fez baixar, neste período, um valor de 6.610 milhões de euros através da redução do preço. Valor que é ligeiramente superior ao sobrecusto. Sobrecusto esse que está mal calculado, mas eu voltei mais à frente a isso. Além disso, poupámos 6.030 milhões de euros de importação de combustíveis, quer de gás natural, quer de carvão para gerar eletricidade, e ainda a aquisição de 524 milhões em licenças de emissão. Apesar de não haver concursos há mais de uma década, os clusters eólicos conseguiram-se readaptar e estão a exportar mais de 400 milhões de euros em aerogeradores e componentes. Tivemos um grande impacto no desenvolvimento local. O contributo das renováveis para o desenvolvimento local é na ordem dos 500 milhões de euros, só neste século. Isto repartido entre taxas a pagar aos municípios em aluguer de terrenos e benfeitorias que fizemos. As renováveis também contribuem para combater o flagelo dos incêndios. Como? Não se esqueçam que os acessos que abrimos, a vigilância que fazemos e os pontos de água nas pequenas hídricas. Houve um facto que pouca gente referiu, aliás, na imprensa muito pouco apareceu isso, mas o grande incêndio do ano passado de Pedrógão, se forem ver a geografia, o incêndio ficou contido por um perímetro nas montanhas de centrais eólicas. Pouco a gente falou isso, mas se não houvesse essas centrais eólicas, se calhar o incêndio tinha sido muitíssimo maior. Depois, há um conjunto de mitos que vem a história de dizer que há rendas excessivas na PRE renovável. Não há rendas excessivas na PRE renovável. Porquê? Porque há um mito, e é preciso que se desmistifique este mito. Comparam-se a nossa tarifa que recebemos nas renováveis, que é uma tarifa completa, recebemos aquele valor, com o valor do combustível marginal das centrais térmicas. Que é feito então, estas centrais térmicas, a carvão e a gás natural, não têm custos de investimento? Não têm custos de operação? Não há CAPEX ou OPEX? Para compararem os preços, não deveria de ser juntado essas duas componentes? Hoje em dia fala-se muito, teve muito tempo, há pouco tempo, nas notícias, a questão dos taxistas. Eu, no outro dia, fiz de propósito isto. Fiz uma corrida que custou 10 euros. Não foi nos dias de greve. E depois perguntei ao motorista quanto é que ele tinha gasto em gasóleo. E ele disse-me, que esta corrida vai 2 euros. Então, eu, se usasse o raciocínio que usam para as centrais renováveis, dizia assim, então se me está a cobrar 10 e o gasóleo só custou 2, os outros 8 são sobre custo. Segundo a teoria que toda a gente fala, são sobre custo. Então, o motorista não era dono do táxi, mas trabalhava para uma empresa. A empresa não teve que investir no táxi? A empresa não tem que pagar o ordenado ao motorista? A empresa não tem que fazer manutenção do táxi? A empresa dona do táxi não tem que ter seguros? E isto não entra na composição do preço? Então, por que raio Há de se continuar a comparar o custo das renováveis com o custo do combustível das fósseis. Não é a altura de acabar com isso? Depois diz, há potência a mais. Eu digo, mas é fóssil, não é renovável. Nós não assinámos o Acordo de Paris e não tínhamos antes assinado o Protocolo de Quioto. E o que é que dizem esses documentos? Que temos que descarbonizar a economia, descarbonizar a sociedade. Descarbonizar a economia e a sociedade não é gerar mais eletricidade com centrais fósseis. Não, é cada vez gerar menos, cada vez gerar mais de uma forma renovável. Portanto, há potência a mais, há fóssil, há potência a menos, renovável. Isto é que é verdade. Há apoios a mais? Há, mas às energias fósseis. Segundo as finanças, em 2018, as isenções com o ISP, e não é para a produção de eletricidade, tiveram uma perda de 415 milhões de euros. Mas, de acordo com o FMI, para esse ano, os custos reais, incluindo os custos escondidos das fósseis, com a saúde e o ambiente, para Portugal, são da ordem de 2 mil milhões de euros por ano. Tenham consciência disso. É preciso dizer isso. Portugal fez um excelente caminho nas energias renováveis, que é reconhecido internacionalmente. Tenho a impressão que não há outro setor da atividade económica que Portugal seja tão reconhecido. Agora é preciso não deitar tudo a perder com uma visão retrógrada do futuro. Taxar mais as energias renováveis é errado, além de dar um sinal contrário a todos os partidos que dizem em público que defendem as renováveis. Defender não é taxar. Na Comissão Parlamentar de Inquérito, que está a decorrer na Assembleia da República, olha-se para o passado. Mas mais importante era ter uma comissão parlamentar que olhe para o futuro e ajude a definir as políticas para um plano nacional de energia e clima ambicioso. Muito mais importante é discutir o futuro. Como chegar a 100% de eletricidade renovável em 2040 e atingir a neutralidade carbónica em 2050, como defende o nosso Primeiro-Ministro. É isso que hoje vamos discutir da parte da tarde. Queremos chegar a 100% de eletricidade renovável. E como eu disse no início, se em 30 anos crescemos a 0,6 terawatts-hora por ano, até se queremos chegar a 100% em 2040, portanto em 20 anos, vamos ter que crescer a um ritmo de 1,4 terawatts-hora por ano. 2,3 vezes mais do que fizemos até hoje, nos últimos 30 anos. E se não quisermos cumprir em 2040, e se quisermos cumpri-lo em 2050, o ritmo de crescimento da energia consumida é 1 terawatt-hora por ano, nos 30 anos que se seguem. É 1,7 vezes o ritmo que fizemos nos últimos 30 anos. É possível? É. Acredito nisto? Acredito. Isto é possível se os governos quiserem, porque os investidores já mostraram a sua disponibilidade. O que é preciso é mostrar previsibilidade e estabilidade na política para com o setor. Mas para se conseguir as 100% de eletricidade renovável, o modelo de remuneração não se poderá basear no mercado marginalista atual. À semelhança do que se está a fazer nos outros países da Europa. É preciso mudar, é preciso pensar, é preciso debater e perceber novos conceitos, porque nós não podemos continuar a funcionar com um mercado marginalista quando o custo marginal da eletricidade que nós perdemos para o futuro é zero ou quase zero. Ninguém vai investir se não for remunerado pelo que faz. É isso que vamos discutir hoje na parte da manhã. Bem-vindos à nossa conferência, bom trabalho e espero que gostem. Muito obrigado. Como viram no programa, o moderador vai ser o Camilo Lourenço e, portanto, passo-lhe a palavra para ele que chamará os oradores desta manhã. Muito obrigado.
Muito obrigado, professor Sá da Costa. Bom dia. O que é que nós estamos aqui a fazer? Como disse o professor Sá da Costa, estamos a analisar o setor, debater as tendências e vamos debater os principais constrangimentos que o setor enfrenta. E enfrenta bastantes, não é? Porque nós estamos confrontados com uma contradição, que é, por um lado, assinamos acordos internacionais, participamos em organizações internacionais que decidem estas matérias e depois, quando se trata de as implementar, é sempre uma dificuldade muito grande. Não porque não haja commitment nesse sentido, mas porque nós não conseguimos ter em Portugal perdão, duas coisas fundamentais para o investimento. Uma é a previsibilidade, a outra é a estabilidade. E isso nota-se muito pela política errática que nós vamos vendo, muitas vezes, de governo para governo. Apesar de haver, no país, um grande consenso em relação a essa matéria. Porque toma-se uma decisão agora e depois, quando chega o governo seguinte, começa a questionar, ou então altera-se o que já foi feito, ou mexe na política fiscal, seja no que for. Ora, isto é a pior coisa que pode acontecer do ponto de vista de investimento, por um lado. Por outro lado, ficamos com dúvidas em relação a questões que vão sendo decididas, e não apenas por governos, mas também por reguladores. E este é o aspecto mais importante. Um regulador é uma instituição que é suposto ser independente. Um regulador é algo que tem de estar acima de todos os interesses em disputa num determinado setor da economia. Ora, o que é que nós vemos aqui? Decisões erráticas. Ora vai neste sentido, ora vai naquela. Mas mais grave do que isto, tivemos um exemplo ontem, é nós tentarmos controlar reguladores nomeando pessoas com conotação política claramente assumida. O que se passou ontem para mim foi dos maiores ataques que se pode fazer em matéria de independência de reguladores. Mas isso à tarde, quando tiver aqui o ministro, e à tarde, quando tivermos aqui os deputados, a gente vai ter a oportunidade de falar sobre isso. Bom, eu vou chamar os ponentes do primeiro painel, que tem como título Tendências Europeias, e isto vai se processar desta maneira. Cada um vai fazer uma intervenção de 12 a 15 minutos e depois iremos conversar sobre aquilo que foi dito. A primeira pessoa que quero chamar ao palco é a Aurélie Beauvais. S'il vous plaît. Aurélie é Policy Director na Solar Power Europe. A segunda pessoa é Heikki Willstedt-Messa, Energy and Climate Change Policies Director na Associação Empresarial Eólica. E, finalmente, o Christopher Jones, Part-Time Professor of Energy Law, European University Institute, Florence, and Principal, Baker and Mackenzie. Please. Aurélie, the stage is yours. You want to talk from there or from here?
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm very sorry I will not be available for doing the presentation in Portuguese today, but well, I'll try to do my best, at least to show you a bit of the overview we have today when it comes to the development of the solar sector in Europe, and in particular, two big megatrends that have been definitely shaping the sector in the last years, which are auctions, indeed, and PPAs. Just a bit of word of who we are. So Solar Power Europe is the European association representing the whole solar sector from the whole value chain, manufacturing to downstream. And we have today over 200 companies which are active in Europe, but also global companies covering the whole world. So we are also active in emerging markets in Africa notably and South America. So a bit of a view, the thing that is very clear for us as we start is that solar is definitely establishing itself as a cost leader today in Europe. It is already cheaper than most of the conventional sources that we find on the market, CCGT and nuclear amongst which. And this is a trend that has been confirming itself strongly in the past years. We can see that most of the solar auctions that were awarded since 2016 are already far below the cost that are related, for example, to the Hinkley Point project in the UK. So there is a stronger and stronger rationale, even in Europe, to focus first on renewables instead of conventional. This trend, of course, is extremely, extremely strong in other parts of the world. Europe is unfortunately still lagging behind. One thing is that it seems there is no frontier anymore when it comes to the bids. So as you can see here, there are more and more bids that are below $2 sorry. And for example, in February there was this bid that was awarded in Aqua region with a bid of $2.34. There are even rumors that the bid was below $2, but it seems that it was beneficial technology and that the government was not so keen to go into it yet because it's quite early. But one thing that we are very sure of, for example, is that the development of beneficial technology, which can improve significantly the performance of the installation, will also again completely trigger a revolution, and we can expect bids below $2 very soon. In Europe, of course, it is not following this trend completely. One thing that is very sure is that there is still a very strong regulatory challenge to tackle. There is a lot of lack of will in many regions, and especially as well the cost of capital, which is still very pregnant, notably in the Center East, due to regulatory uncertainty. Of course, Europe is recovering from a very, very strong period of retroactive changes, and the confidence of investors has been significantly impacted by this change. So, however, we can see a clear downward trend, which has been pushed significantly by the latest auctions. And even in less sunny regions, like Germany, we can see really prices that become more and more interesting. When it comes to then this big movement about auctions and the fact that the cost, the LCOE of solar has been able to decrease significantly, you start having a lot of enthusiasm about what would be defined as zero-cost solar or subsidy-free solar. We had this discussion earlier as well. More and more, with this very low cost, the investors start to be able to recover their investments as well, just based on the market price. Even though today what we really see is that this movement is not yet fully mature for our markets. One thing is that indeed we have today in Europe, according to Bloomberg New Energy Finance, at least 15 projects that are running and are considered to be subsidy-free. Of course, when we say subsidy-free, we had this discussion with Christopher earlier, we should say more like low cost or almost zero cost, because it's true that in most of the cases you have a regulatory support anyway. They finance the grid connection or they support you in another way in order to keep the costs as low as possible. But it is developing more and more in Europe. However, this is not something that is yet completely ready. There are several reasons, and the first big chunk of reasons would be, of course, visibility. Of course, solar today doesn't have a level playing field with other technologies, so renewables in general are not able to compete and remunerate themselves on the market as much as they could. A second one, of course, is long-term visibility on the revenues, because it is quite very uncertain as the wholesale trends are really downward. It's uncertain for investors to really be confident they will recover their investments in the future. And of course, the third element is the financing schemes. It is still extremely complicated in some parts of Europe, and we really need to get more innovative on this bit, especially when we transition to a system which has less or no feed-in tariff and less feed-in premiums. The second big issue we have relating to the wide development of the solar sector in Europe is really the notion of scalability. And this, the auctions will not solve it. This is really something we have to work on at a regulatory level and together with all the member states. As you can see, the growth of solar in Europe is still extremely divided. You have Germany and Italy also the UK, which are shown, I think they're in yellow on the graph. So this is basically the biggest market we have. And in the last 2 years, Germany and UK accounted alone for 56% of the added capacity. So we are 27 member states, and we have 2 member states having really the big chunk. So this is something we have to work on, because European companies need to be able to scale their investments all across Europe. Another big divide that we have, as you see, is a big divide between utility scale and smaller scale, being residential, commercial, industrial. This is also something we should definitely tackle. The reason is because for us, both models have very strong advantages to exploit. Of course, utility scale will be very useful to reach very ambitious targets at a low cost. If you look at the countries that are having the most chunk of utility scales, it's mostly countries that have put in place very incentive tenders in the early stages to reach their 2020 targets, put in place all the big chunks of utility scale solar, and then just quit their system of support and quit all new investments. That's a bit sad, but it was their way to achieve their target at a low cost. If you look at other countries which have a lot more of industrial, commercial, and residential, this is something that's very positive, not so much on the cost side, but more on the societal aspect. Because if you develop small-scale or medium-scale solar, for example, in our facilities, SMEs building, we made a very extensive study with Ernst & Young in Solar Power Europe, and it appears that small-scale solar can provide 3 times more jobs, notably, because most of the jobs are local. And it's local, it doesn't move, and you will have, instead of installing a big chunk, to install a lot of small chunk all across your regions. And for this, you will refer to the audit cabinet of your town, you will refer to the installers of your town, and there is a whole ecosystem going with it, as well as the support of the competitiveness of the SMEs. So for us, this is important to keep in mind in Europe, that the cost is not everything, and that not all models, I mean, each model really brings something different to the whole society. For our companies, it is crucial to unlock the European market in these matters. We need all member states to want both first, which is not a given at all, and to put in place positive, favorable frameworks for our investors. I'll finish on small scale just to say that most of our European companies are today leading in these technologies. If we look at utility scale, we focus on the cost and we don't retain a lot of industrial value. If we look at small and medium scale in Europe, our companies are still leading in these innovative business models. So Christopher will speak later on about the clean energy package, but this is really something for us that will be determinant to trigger this balanced growth across country and across business models. So, as I said, a bit going back to the beginning of the presentation about auctions and about the fact that going subsidy-free, we kind of miss the visibility and the scalability aspect across all countries. This is why more and more PPAs are really becoming fashionable in Europe, because they gather the 2 aspects that we need. Of course, visibility, because you will be able to forecast the revenues that you will get for the market, the cash flows. It's easier to get financing through this kind of models, notably. And scalability, of course, because these kind of models are actually not dependent on the regulatory framework, or few. We will go into it later, but it's less dependent from the overall regulatory incentive framework you have in place. What you need is a good contract, a good buyer, a good supplier, and then you can go forward with your offer. Of course, PPAs need to be allowed, and that's something we will enter in details a bit later on. So I've been asked as well to propose a bit of an overview of the PPAs as well in Europe. And we have actually, as Solar Power Europe, engaged a partnership very recently, 1 year ago, with our counterpart Wind Europe and also with Bloomberg New Energy Finance, in order to understand a bit how the market is developing and what could be the direct opportunities for the solar companies. So one thing that's for sure is that corporate PPAs are extremely promising in Europe. There is a big chunk we are missing on today, but we can achieve. If you look at Europe, of course, we're not leading at the moment in terms of volume, but we have actually a tremendous potential. This is a chart that shows amount of renewable demand that would be needed only to cover the pledges of RE100 companies in Europe. So the RE100 companies are companies that pledge to be 100% renewable by 2030, or no, yeah, 2030. And so basically they have to cover their demand by all means, and PPAs are a very good way for them to do it. They need also the guarantees of origin or green certificates coming along together. But this only shows that the shortfall in terms of renewable demand for PPAs will be of 67 terawatt-hour. That's huge by 2030. And this is a demand that our companies can provide, and actually they are quite eager to do so. The development of PPAs in Europe is also, it's coming across all sector, all companies, and this is also why we think it's very beneficial. Coming back to the scalability, you have actually a very wide range of players engaging in it to cover their pledges or to reduce their overall supply costs. So this is why we really need to think more about renewables and medium scale when we think about supporting the economy and supporting the distribution of wealth across our regions. Of course, the big chunk missing here is the SMEs, and this is a big chunk that is missing everywhere, maybe, I mean, including in Spain. I don't know if you will mention it, Eki, but it's true that when we speak as well with our Spanish counterpart, it seems there is a big loophole, and SMEs, we should definitely try to grasp them as well in our growth. Of course, a big challenge that we have still, coming back to what I presented earlier, is the fact that, again, the growth related to corporate PPAs is only located in two big areas. Of course, the Nordic area, which has been having its system of certificate for a long time, and the Netherlands, which have been also very, very active in the matter. But it could change because, of course, there are also regulatory changes to anticipate. And the UK, before the reliability auction system expired, it was also very positive. Which is one thing that is the second challenge, is that PPAs today, again, are still very much regulatory driven. You can see here how the growth of PPAs was impacted notably in the Netherlands and in the UK. And you can see that the incentives, the regulatory incentives that are marked by this SDE Plus, which is a system in Netherlands, and the reliability options in the UK, this is what is driving mostly the growth. And this is why, in the frame of the clean energy package notably, we have been extensively advocating for the development of a European-wide system for green certificates, as well as the removal of administrative barriers all across country in order to be able to develop these business models everywhere. In Portugal, for example, so with the resource platform, we developed a matrix with the 14 business models and trying to look where they apply across the 27 countries in Europe. Well, in Portugal, from what we have gathered as information, there are a lot of models that are not possible by regulation, like direct line or off-site PPAs or virtual PPAs. The problem being that, of course, if we only relate to self-owned on-site, we miss, again, a big potential in terms of renewable development. So to follow up with this regulatory challenge, indeed, we also have a lot of other chunks to solve. The long-term visibility over the market prices. This time, uncertainty shifts. So, for example, before it was for the project developer, the investor, to make sure the market price will give him back his investment. And here we are on the side of the buyer. Is he actually interesting? Is it interesting for the buyer to go over a contract today for 12, 15 years. It is not obvious in all markets. The second one is the legal gray area. So I was talking a bit about it before when it comes to the regulatory framework for Portugal. What we see is that in many countries we don't know how to build a PPA. We don't know if it has to go through tenders, if you are eligible to a support scheme, and all these gray areas have to be solved in order to strengthen the trust of investors in these business models across Europe. I will say again that in the US, PPAs are now almost half of the installed capacity annually. In Europe, this is minimal. So I mentioned it before, of course, a European-wide certificate scheme in order to pool the synergies across our different regions and be able to trade them across country. Unfortunately, today there is still a lot of fracture on who has this kind of business model and how it is being implemented. A very clear example is that, for example, in some countries like France and Germany, you cannot have a green certificate if you are a subsidized producer. This is something that today, for the development of renewable PPAs, is very problematic. And of course, you need to find the right business model. This is a problematic we have all over the place. We were discussing PPAs in Mexico early September. They did actually the same work, the ASOLMEX Association. They found 7 business models for their country. On our side, we have 14. And each one of these business models will fit with the proper regulatory framework in place and also the kind of consumer we are looking at. And finally, as I was mentioning, something extremely important is to keep in mind attracting the small and medium consumers. Because if today we look at who is engaging in corporate PPAs, we are not surprised the GAFAs are in the top place. And then you have, again, the very heavy consumers from all kinds of sectors. But we need to grasp the SME bit. And for us, that's also a strong part of our advocacy. So then I will end up with a bit of self-publicity. Forgive me for this, but of course, what is the answer? Well, this is the platform we created, and I would invite everyone to have a look at what we are doing. So the resource platform, as it is called, you can recognize probably, if some of you know, Paula Abreu-Marquez, which is an eminent European politician, Portuguese European politician in charge of developing the policy for renewables. And so this platform, which was built by Solar Power Europe and Wind Europe, and very soon joined by the Area 100 companies and World Business Council of Sustainable Development, is trying to look at these challenges that we have in every member state and how to overcome them. For this, we are actually supported by a steering committee of clean energy buyers and sellers, so big utilities, big corporate consumers, in order also to get the business feedback about what's happening in each one of the European countries. So this platform is here to engage with European policymakers, which we have been doing extensively in the frame of the Renewable Energy Directive, raise awareness and create knowledge, because going out of the grey area also means we have to advise our governments on what are the best ways for developing corporate PPAs, and notably it comes to the standardization when it comes to the contractual templates, for example, or looking at the business model and doing some tailor-made advice. So we are doing all of this with our partners, and we organize notably an annual event in order to sum up all of this, to which we are, you are all invited. Sorry, this event will be very soon hosted in November in Amsterdam. And that's it for now. Thank you for your attention.
And now we have Heikki Billstedt. We have a 12 to 15 minute slot, so I hope the speakers keep up with it. Thank you. Yeah, a bit.
Bom dia. Well, that's all my Portuguese for the moment, but when the day will be over, I'm sure I will know more. I actually understood erratic regulators. So we know something about that in Spain.
Common language in Europe.
Oh, sorry. I can't see it there. Okay. Well, I would like to say that Spain and Portugal, in a certain way, they are like Siamese brothers, especially because we are connected by copper. And in that sense, what happens on one side and on the other side of the border actually affects all power consumers. This is a very important thing. We share whatever happens to electricity. So the challenge for both Portugal and Spain is to find a way to what Antonio was saying, that by 2040 we need to have 100% renewables in the power sector. This is a challenge. It's a common challenge because we will do it all together, because if one doesn't do it, the other can't, because we are connected. So to understand a little bit the problems that we can have with these erratic regulators, first of all, let me say that as here in Portugal, in Spain we had a good development of renewables until 2012, more or less. Then a certain idea that the death of all the problems in Spain, as you say in Spain, you say the death, even the death of the toreadors, was the fault of renewables. So this is nonsense. But the result of these erratic regulators or erratic policies about renewables was that something that could have been an anti-cyclical development, in the sense that instead of not stopping investment in renewables when you have a crisis, you continue investing because this is a good business, then you would have avoided most of the problems that at least we in Spain have now. And you will see, and you will understand why I'm saying this. You can see that wind in Spain developed from 0 in 1990 to 23 gigawatts of installed power, which produces 48 to 50 terawatt hours per year. This is a lot of energy. It's almost as much as all the nuclear power in Spain. And it's clean, and it's autochthonous. So, but in 2012, the government decided, okay, we stop completely with all the consequences, because there is so-called tariff deficit. But this tariff deficit was not created by renewables. This was a decision by the politicians. This is a big difference between one thing and the other. But let's not get into that, because otherwise I can be crying in front of you for a couple of hours. So, and coming to erratic decisions, this stop, you can see there were no developments between 2012 and 2017. But in 2016, a light bulb, suddenly lighted up in the head of the minister, and he realized that without further installations, Spain would never achieve 20% renewables, which was the objective for 2020. So, well, he said, okay, let's do some auctions, because we want to squeeze the cost of new installations, which is okay. I mean, we didn't like the idea, because the development was not necessarily the best, given the lack of experience also in auctions in Spain, but okay, we said, well, better this than nothing. And the result was that in 2016, the government started with a small auction of 500 megawatt for wind and 200 megawatt for biomass. This was technology differentiated. So the history goes that nobody knew exactly how this worked out, and there was a lot of pressure, because all the projects that were stalled between 2012 and 2016. So in the end, the result was that there was so much competitive pressure that all the 500 megawatts of wind and 200 megawatts of biomass, which doesn't make sense in any case, especially for biomass, were awarded at market price. It means no incentive at all. The government, of course, was very happy, because the message is we can do renewables without subsidies, or, well, I prefer to call it incentives, without incentives. But let's see how it works out. So the year after that, in 2017, suddenly there was another auction for 3,000 megawatts. But in this case, all technologies had to compete against each other. And, well, the design was a little bit bad, because it was finally it was decided that there was a floor on the discount on the investment on the capex that you could offer, you could bid, but you could almost imagine what was going to happen. So they did the auction, and there were thousands and thousands of megawatts that bid at the lowest level. So in total, there were all the 3,000 megawatts were awarded at maximum discount, and almost all to wind. Why were awarded to wind? because the formula was set so that when there was equal bids, it was the technology that had more equivalent hours of production that will get awarded the megawatts. Okay, you know, wind produces more megawatts than solar. This is not a competition, it's just a fact. It's just a fact. If you have wind, in the places where you have wind, you have more equivalent hours of solar. But this is in the case of Spain when you have good wind and with normal solar. And the result was also because of the lowest level of the bid, resulting bid that could be translated into euros per megawatt hour, which if you translate it into cost of energy, the lowest bid, the floor, was 42.53 euros per megawatt hour. But that, it doesn't mean that the installations would get this money. It means that this is the level below which, if the market price goes for 3 years in a row below this level, you might get an incentive. There is a complicated way of calculating this. It depends on each IT, on each installation, but this is more or less the idea. Then the government decided, oh wow, I got 3,000 megawatts for nothing. So I do another auction, because I have all these PV installations that offered and were not awarded under the auction. This is very good planning. And suddenly they say, okay, after 2 months, we do another auction, this is not good practice anyway, because you don't do auctions because you feel like it's nice to have an auction. If you want to have serious, I mean, you need serious planning and serious, well-thought bids. In any case, the auction was held in July, and not only were the 3,000 megawatts awarded, because there was a clause that if everybody was bidding below a certain level, then all the installations that were bidding below that level will be also awarded. So instead of 3,000, we had 5,037 megawatts awarded. This is amazing. It's the biggest auction in the world. 5,000 megawatts just in one go. 4,000 megawatts almost PV, 1,128 wind. Crazy. And the worst part of it, I must say it, is that everything has to be ready by the end of next year. 8,500 megawatts connected to the grid and producing energy by 31st of December of 2019. Well, this is a challenge. It's a challenge for the wind power sector. It's a challenge. We said from the beginning, okay, we can make it, but then everybody has to make it too. I mean, the central government, regional administrations, local administrations, the grid operator, the distribution operators, everybody has to come together and we have to make it together. Well, somebody is trying. Some parts are working, some parts are a little bit less. But if you are in the wind power sector in Spain and you are going to make a wind farm, I hope you have all the cranes already booked, because they are being taken from all over the Europe just for next year in Spain. You will see cranes all over the country. Okay, so it's going to be interesting, because certainly it's an exceptional. If you think about it, these 8,500 megawatts, they will produce 20 terawatt hours of energy. 20 terawatt hours. It's like if you do about 3,000, 4,000 megawatts of nuclear in 1 year. Well, we'll show them. Okay, so what were the exceptional? Why these results in the auctions? First of all, there were some exceptional factors. First of all, there was no visibility. This was one go. I mean, we didn't know in 2016 whether there were going to be more auctions. And after the auction in May, we didn't know that there was going to be a second auction in July in 2017. So bids were pressured to win. I mean, the bidders were pressured to win. Then going back to the moratorium in new installations, in Spain there was a pipeline for every year, for instance in wind, to come online about 1,500, 2,000 megawatts of projects. All these projects didn't disappear. They were there, but they were not being constructed, and they were not being invested in them, because there was no regime, there was no framework, the regulatory framework. So they were there, the projects were there. And they had the permits, and the permits with the new law were going to expire in 2018. So the pressure to get all these projects to completion was quite high, or if you don't make them, you lose them. And then one important factor also is that all utilities that have coal, they are aware that at some point they will have to close these installations. So you have to substitute this coal production. And you will not substitute it with other coal. You will go for renewables because it's the cheapest, it's the fastest, and it's the one that helps the company to achieve the environmental goals also of the company. But there were other so-called normal factors. The first of all that we take into consideration is between 2014 and now, we have had very low capital cost, interest rates. That means that it's much cheaper, or it was much cheaper to get money, capital, to do the projects than it was, for instance, during the crisis, that makes a lot of difference. Then we have a very important technology improvement when it comes to wind. It's the so-called silent revolution. It means that between 2012 and 2018, when we are speaking now, the capex cost of wind have gone about 30–40% down. But also very, very important is the equivalent hours of production have gone up from about 2,300 in a 6.5 meters per second location to about 3,000 hours. That means that the costs are down, the capex, and the production is up. This is in Spain. It has become very evident because we stopped installing in 2012, and now we start installing in 2018-19. So the technology difference is huge, huge. The last turbines we were installing, they were about 2,500, 2,700 hours in the best places. Now we have 3,500, 4,000 hours equivalent in the equivalent places. This is a big, big difference, and also explains some of the result of the auctions. Then we have one thing that was the expected market price. At that time, the expected market price in the future, as you know, OMIP has the future contracts, was above the result prices in the auctions. So you had a possibility to think that you can get some capital by entering to PPAs, because big consumers would see that the prices of electricity will be high, and the cost with these new installations, the energy of these new installations will be lower. But in order to not to take too long, what we got, the messages after the auctions was that wind was competitive. Well, yes, we had less capex, more production, but we needed more adequate planning. To have 8,500 megawatts installed of wind and solar in 1 year is not the best way of doing things, especially because it creates pressure on the whole logistical network. We needed visibility beyond 2020. It's good to have all these new megawatts installed, but what happens afterwards? We have an industry, wind power industry, with a lot of small SMEs that are working for the whole network. What happens with them? Is this going to be one off, and then they have to close the shop, or this will mean that there will be some further developments after that. We'll see. And it will be, of course, a logistical challenge. You know, if you have to, not only from the point of view of cranes and construction, but also from administrative permits, which is one of the big problems. You probably know in Portugal, it's very slow. And that, we hope that the directive will help improving this situation. Okay, I won't go through all these statistics. We think that the next year we'll have all this, you can see this bump in new wind installations from almost nothing in 2017. We had 80 megawatts. We'll go up to almost 3,500 in 2019, and maybe afterwards we think that we can stabilize above 1,000 megawatts per year, but as I will explain on why we believe this. We believe this because, well, we have an ambitious renewable objective at the European level, which is now 32%. This means a lot of, especially because you need to do it in the power sector, most of it. Between 50, 60, or even 70% of the efforts has to go into the power sector, especially in Spain. So this is also a challenge. We need also to upgrade the market design. The market design needs to give the right signals to investors. It will be good if the CO2 price will help in this, and so we will see it has started to do so. Increased power demand, we need electrification. That will help also for consumers. The more demand we have, the more the efforts are diluted, because every kilowatt hour is further kilowatt hour dilutes more the economic effort. We need to make regions and local authorities understand that the era of incentives for wind, for instance, is over. Wind needs to go without incentives, just stabilize prices, which means that we need to have another type of auctions where you auction the cost of energy and then you receive a certain price, let's say 50 euros or 47 euros or whatever, and then that's what you receive, and then the contract for difference you get. If the market is above, you compensate the grid, and if the market is and if the price is below, then you get compensated, more or less like in UK. So yeah, that needs, the local authorities and regional authorities need to understand this and reduce the fiscal, in Spain, the fiscal pressure on wind farms is huge, especially in the areas where there is a lot of wind. So we need to, everybody needs to put a little bit of good faith in this and lower a little bit the economic expectations, because there is no incentives anymore. Then we need to have yearly actions, a schedule. We have asked the new government for schedule, and then we hope that they will announce it soon, at least 3 years in advance. But we'll see if they have the time to do this. And then enable PPAs, as Aurelie was saying. This is a very important tool to finance wind farms, but not the only one, and certainly not for thousands of megawatts. You certainly cannot do, not the way the PPAs are done at this moment. You can have hundreds of megawatts with PPAs, but not thousands. As I was saying, we are connected, Portugal and Spain, through the wires, and the result is that we have very high power prices because of the last policies of the last 5 years or something like that, where there's no renewables. And then you left to the market, international markets of gas and CO2 to decide the prices. This is very liberal, it's okay. But what happens to the consumer? Well, the consumer pays the inaction of the government, because at some point the demand has gone up, gas prices have gone up, CO2 prices have gone up, which is what we wanted. That's why we have the ETS, and that's why it was reformed. And suddenly they realized, oops, we don't like these prices. Well, you should have done something about it. Don't start crying now. 5 years without doing nothing, and then suddenly something happens because you didn't do anything. Okay, so this is the result. Now we all have to pay more because of these policies. So I finish. We think that the current government in Spain will establish a very ambitious renewables objective, which will be about the 32% for Europe. And that will mean that we think that they will have to have auctions, yearly auctions, for about 6,000, 7,000 megawatt of renewables every year from 2020 to 2030. Almost as much as we're going to install next year will have to be installed every year until 2030. Well, this is a challenge. The market price futures, well, they are giving good signals, of course. They are about 60, and well, longer in the future, about 50. So the PPAs are possible, but as I said, you can do hundreds of megawatts with this, probably not thousands of megawatts. And in the end, the question will be, will we have the right framework, the right regulatory framework to do this, the auctions, and then we will respect the prices that come out of the auctions, because this is a big question. Everybody that has invested in Spain knows that there is erratic policies are very dangerous. So we are optimistic. We think that it is possible to do to take on this big challenge next year and also for the next decade. It would mean a lot for the Spanish economy, also for the Portuguese economy, I'm sure, if you have similar objectives. And in the end, we will share. The good news is that if all the installations come online next year, 20 terawatt hours of new renewables, the price of the market will certainly go down. We have calculated the impact could be between 5 and 10 euros per megawatt hour in the market price compared to doing nothing. So this is a good message from the auctions. In any case, I enjoy being here. I thank you very much, APREN, for the invitation. We have invited also a friend from APREN to our event that is taking today place in Madrid, and we hope that we will continue this cooperation fruitfully. Thank you very much. Obrigado.
Thank you, Eike. Christopher Jones, your turn.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the kind invitation to be here. I'm speaking today in my capacity as a professor at the University of Florence. I've been asked by Antonio, and thank you for inviting me, Antonio, to set the underlying drivers of the European energy policy and how this will have, and how this will have a major effect on what we do over the next 10, 20, 30 years, and to try and bring some transparency in. And at the end of the day, all I need to do is show you this graph. Because that graph shows everything you need to know about European energy policy, and I can stop right now. Is that okay? Or no, okay, I'll carry on a bit. Okay, but whoever explains to Antonio what this graph means, he will buy you a beer. Okay, so the first thing you need to know, I'm going to talk a little bit about the origins of European energy policy, because once you understand where we're coming from and where we're going, you get a really clear idea of what you need to do from an industrial, from a company, from an association point of view over the next decades, because the path is very clear. Now, European energy policy dates from 2005. Before that, we did not have a European energy policy. And in 2005, it was decided by the heads of state that we want a European energy policy because we were faced with 3 key challenges. And they go into those 3 areas. And this was what the heads of state said, we want an energy policy like this. We want one that's based on security of energy supply, because at the time Russia was threatening to cut off gas supplies to the European Union, and Central and Eastern Europe has 80+ % dependence on Russia. We wanted competitiveness because our electricity and gas prices were higher than those of our competitors, and we want sustainability, okay? Because we needed to put forward our position towards Kyoto. So on the basis of that, we designed the following approach. And you see the various different areas. So the first was the liberalization of the gas and electricity markets, which has gone apace. We had the first, the second, and the third package, and now we have market design. You had the 20-20-20, notably the Renewable Directive, the emissions trading, the non-ETS sector, the CO2s for cars, and all the energy efficiency legislation that we now know and some of us at least love. You had the 10E regulation. Put very simply, the European Union decided to put 5.6 billion euros into connecting Central Eastern Europe to at least 3 sources of gas to break the monopoly of Gazprom and to start to ensure that the European Union's electricity grid was fit for purpose. But we will talk more about that because the European electricity grid today is not fit for purpose for where it will need to be in 2050. And then we have all the oil stocks and again the energy efficiency. Now, so let's look a little bit about how successful we've been in terms of meeting that triangle. So first of all, I'll talk very quickly about gas because it's important, which is that by 2020, with the use of this 5.6 billion euros, every single country in the European Union will have access to 2 or 3 sources of gas. And most importantly, in the Central Eastern Europe, it will have at least 3 sources of gas, meaning that if Gazprom would seek to cut off supplies, the real loser from that would be Gazprom. And that is a huge change. In terms of renewable energy, just let me pause for a second, because you'll recall, you know, that in 2007, the EU agreed that it would have the target of 20% renewable energy in its energy mix, not in its electricity mix, okay, by 2020. What that meant in 2007 is that we would do all the wind and the solar that we had ever done before 2007 every single year until 2020. And the amazing thing is that we're going to do it. That is a remarkable, remarkable achievement. The other thing is that this has caused something remarkable. And this is something that European citizens should be deeply proud of. If the European Union had not done this, you would not have had the industrialization of renewables at the time we did, and you would not have had the price reductions in the way we did, and you would not have had this explosion in renewable energy across the world, which at least gives us hope that the recent report of the International Panel of Climate Change on how do we get to 1.5 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels has a chance of succeeding. And there you see the levelized cost of energy, of electricity, on the different areas. And this, as I say, this is something that Europeans should be deeply proud of. And there's another point here that both Aurélie and Heike said, which is, I'll put it another way. If you track over the last 12 years, and you look every year, what was the outlier in terms of the low cost of electricity, whether you're talking about wind, whether you're talking about offshore wind, whether you're talking about PV, what was an outlier, the best in class in year 1, becomes the average in year 4. And you see this every single time. And there's no reason why this is going to be a thing of the past, not a thing of the future. Those are the offshore wind. We haven't talked about offshore wind today. And I'm sure, as many of you know, some of the recent bids for offshore wind in the most recent tenders have come out at zero subsidy compared to future market price. That is also a fundamental change for the European Union. Okay, so those are the positives. Okay, those are the positives, because we have to have positives and negatives. Let's talk about some negatives of what we have. Firstly is that electricity prices have gone up. And for many of the poorer citizens in the European Union, this is a challenge. And I have to say, for me, this is one of the greatest challenges that we have in terms of ensuring that we get to 2050. Because unless you continue to have support of your citizens for decarbonisation, you will not decarbonise. And if you continue this trend of increasing electricity prices, you will lose that confidence. And this has to be at the forefront not only of regulators when they are saying we have to achieve our targets, but we have to achieve our targets in a way that creates jobs in Europe, and we have to achieve our targets in a way that keeps electricity prices down, because of course that's circular. Okay, this is very, very important. So, gas, we're pretty much competitive outside the US. Okay, so, there are some challenges, some clouds on the horizon that we are going to have to face if we wish to meet our climate change objectives. There's one that I would like to mention that is concern, which is we also have energy efficiency objectives. And a lot of those have been working well. In the past, we have succeeded in decoupling the amount of energy we use and the increase in GDP that we've achieved. So our energy intensity has been improving. So between 2006 and 2014, our energy consumption fell from 1,850 MTOE to 1,625, about a 10% reduction. However, at the same time, our GDP between 2006 and 2014 increased from 12,500 to 14,000. So if you like, our GDP went up by about 10% and our consumption of energy went down by about 10%. Really good news, because it makes achieving our renewables targets easier and it makes achieving our energy efficiency targets much easier. However, since 2014, this trend has reversed. So since 2014, more or less, our energy consumption has increased from 1625 MTOE to 1700, and our GDP has increased from 1400 to 1550. So both ones are on an upward path. This is going to make it more difficult to achieve our renewable targets and very much more difficult to achieve energy efficiency targets, especially energy efficiency, because as you drive around Lisbon this afternoon, think that in order to achieve our energy efficiency targets, it means refurbishing that building, that building, that building, that building. And that is the real challenge. So, other clouds on the horizon. Last year, Germany had about 40% average renewable energy. But on many days, on some days, it had more than 100% renewable electricity. Okay? As we move to the higher levels of renewable energy that we are going to need, and I will talk about these in a minute, these will cause huge problems of balancing on the grid. That is a given. Okay? And how do we achieve that? When we have too much renewables, we can either increase consumption. Okay, you can do something there. You can have storage, you can store the electricity, batteries, hydrogen, or you can simply disconnect the windmills and the PV producers. Those are your three choices, basically. And when there's not enough, we have our capacity mechanisms. Burning gas, for example, which of course has problems in the way that you devise these capacity mechanisms. Okay? So, what's the Commission's response? And here we are. This is the key things that the Commission has been doing in the current Energy Union. And let's look at these in more detail now. So, the first is the Clean Energy Package. Okay? And I'd just like to explain to you the framework of what is currently being finalised. The first is, let's look at that, the revised Renewable Energy Directive, the revised Energy Efficiency Directive, the new electricity market design, if you like, the fourth internal market package, and energy union governance. Now, all of these are important in understanding where the renewables market is going to go. And these are the key targets that the European Union has agreed. Now, I want to make a side here. We had the report of the IPCC 2 days ago that said if we want to keep to the objectives of the Paris Agreement, which is to keep temperatures up to limit to 1.5 pre-industrial levels, and I do commend that you read the summary of the IPCC report because it puts very good reasons why you should keep to 1.5 degrees. Okay? That means that globally, we are going to need a 35% CO2 cut by 2030, globally, not in Europe. Okay? So there is a very good argument as to why these targets are not high enough. Okay? But they're very, very ambitious. So this is where you start pausing for thought of how we're going to achieve our climate change objectives. Okay? So, firstly, we are going to go from 20 to 40% reduction in greenhouse gases. We're going to go from 20 to 32% renewable energy. We're going to go from 20 to 32.5% energy efficiency. And we are going to have a target of, instead of 10% interconnection between member states, for Portugal and for Iberia in particular, this is important, to 15%. Another parenthesis. When we talk about renewable energy, we're talking about the whole of the system. Many people confuse when we say we're going to have a 32% renewable energy target. People think that means we're going to have a 32% electricity target. No, 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 no. Okay? Renewable energy means over the whole system. Industry, agriculture, buildings, transport, electricity, the whole lot. Now, it's really difficult to get renewable energy in the short term into transport and into buildings and into industry. So electricity is going to have to do the heavy lifting. So in order to achieve this 32%, by 2030, we're about 30%, a bit less than 30% renewable electricity today in our system. We are going to have 55% renewable electricity in the European system by 2030. Otherwise, this doesn't work. It's that simple. Okay? So first of all, what does that mean for each country? How are we going to achieve it? And what does that mean in terms of the electricity system? As I said, Germany, with about 40% electricity, renewable electricity, has days when it's already 100%. When the whole of the European Union has on average 55%, the amount that you're going to need in terms of balancing is going to be much higher. It's going to be a much bigger challenge. So, we have a revised ETS directive that is delivering, as Heike said. The problem with the ETS directive at the beginning is it was sitting at 6, 8 euros a tonne. We're now north of 20. And this is two things. Firstly, the understanding of where the European Union is really committed to going. Secondly, the long-term vision. Thirdly, the ETS directive, which has a provision where we suck out certificates if the price is too cheap, and then throw them away if the price doesn't recover. Okay? And so this is a good basis now. There is the Renewables Directive. Now, here is a big change, and this is important. In the previous Renewable Electricity Directive, the European Union agreed that for each member state there would be a legally binding target. Portugal had a specific percentage which it was legally obliged to reach. Spain, as Heike said, had a legally required target that was required to meet, that led Spain right at the end to go, help, basically, but it has led to action to achieve it. Okay? Now, in the new Renewable Directive, there will only be a European, what we call a legally binding target on ourselves, because it's in the directive, okay? But there will not be legally binding targets on the national level. This is a big change, and it is a big challenge for us. But we also have some very good things as well, which is an improved support design, scheme design. In particular, an end to retroactive changes in support, which in some countries like Spain has increased the cost of capital due to uncertainty. So And the other thing is a voluntary opening of renewable support schemes towards neighbouring member states. If we have time, I'd be very happy to talk about the difficulty that we have in Europe that too much of the renewables... Okay. Heike, I think you're partly Finnish, aren't you? It makes as much sense to put PV in Luxembourg as it does to grow olives in Finland. Okay. But that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. Heike is probably going to tell us that they actually do grow olives in Finland, but hey-ho. So, then, in terms of energy efficiency, we have a hugely ambitious target. And this is really, really, really difficult to do. Because, as I say, it means putting real changes into buildings. But there's one thing that is worthwhile noting. It's not on this slide. That the directive says that member states shall ensure that there is a 1.5% improvement in energy efficiency per year in the domestic, or the electricity consumption, if you like. And that member states may impose this obligation on energy distributors and retailers, or they may find other ways of doing it. My experience is other ways of doing it means the member state has to use its national budget in order to subsidize consumers, and it's a lot easier just to say to the electricity sellers, you do it. So this will have profound effects on electricity companies of all types. Now, I'll skip over that. Now I want to talk about governance, because this is really, really important, because it's the quid pro quo of the fact we do not have legally binding targets. Because, of course, you're no doubt sitting there thinking, well, if we don't have legally binding targets, this is never going to happen. Okay? So, what we have is a governance provision. Now, the governance provision is that each member state has an obligation to define its detailed energy policy up to 2030. It has an obligation to define what its renewables targets are going to be, how it's going to achieve them. What is energy efficiency targets, how it's going to achieve them. And then there is a process between the member states and the European Commission that helps the European Commission and the European Union ensure that our overall targets will be met. Now, this is the way that this will bring the transparency and the predictability to the market that both Aurélie and Heike has mentioned and is fundamental. Because if we don't have a clear and predictable stream of investments, we will not get down the cost of capital, we will not ensure that renewable energy still continues to have cost reductions, and we will not bring those price reductions onto citizens that are so sorely needed. So, I would like to finish. One other thing is that this is the next budget of the European Union as proposed by the European Commission. You will notice that climate mainstreaming, what that means is 25% of everything that the European Commission spends has to be on climate-related stuff, if you like. But the Connecting Europe facility, and this will be about electricity now. The gas thing is done. So this will be about making sure that our grid is fit for purpose, because unfortunately, the centres of consumption are largely not where the consumers, not where the production is. Okay? So we're going to have huge investments in infrastructure. The European Union estimates that the total cost of achieving our objectives will require investments of in the order of 300 billion a year in the European Union. Now, the point I would like to make here is this. The EU has set itself the objective of an 80% reduction, at least, in CO2. And I am personally rather sure from an intellectual point of view that the EU is going to have to increase this. So, if you assume that the bottom line, which is basically agriculture, is not going to reduce that much, and if you assume that some of the NOx emissions and other really tough to get out of emissions only reduce slightly, what it means is the only way you get to an 80% cut is more or less zero carbon electricity, zero carbon transport, zero carbon buildings, and zero carbon industry by 2050. Okay? That's what, 32 years away. I know what I was doing 32 years ago, and I guess most of you do too. It goes in a heartbeat, doesn't it? So the point is that the action that we are now taking is just the beginning of what we will do. And if we think that the European Union will turn away from its obligation to deal with climate change, you're wrong. The European Union will not. So the electricity system will be decarbonised, or let's say 90% decarbonised, by 2050. And to decarbonise, it means nuclear. You can hardly say Hinkley Point without people laughing anymore, can you? Or it means renewables. Or it means secreted CO2. And good luck persuading people to accept that we're going to bury CO2 in land in the European Union. So the point I would like to make here is that we are just at the start of this change. And in order to deliver even the 2030 targets, the way that we've been doing things in the past is not the way we're going to have to do them in the future. We are also going to need massive renewable energy investments. We are going to need 200 gigawatts of offshore wind in the North Sea. And I would ask the question whether Portugal is not also very, very well situated and has very great opportunities, not just in Portugal, but in its southern neighbours as well, to undertake major projects in order to help this. Now, the last slide. We're back to here. Anybody? So this is the slide that somebody will show in the year 12,001, and it's the use of hydrocarbons on the planet Earth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christopher. Let me get back to the final part of your speech. Do you think society is going to be willing to support all this effort?
I think there's two things to that. When I'm teaching students, and I try and explain climate change, I'm sure everybody has had the pleasure of trying to explain climate change and why we need to deal with it to people who don't want to believe in it. Yeah. Not that don't believe, they just don't want to because they'd rather stick their head in the sand and, yeah. And so, okay, why don't you say this, okay? Well, okay, the seas are going to rise. The Dutch have been dealing with this for years. No big deal, okay? We are going to get species extinction. Oh, come on, dinosaurs. You know, why is this a problem? Okay? We're going to get new diseases. Hey, we've dealt with AIDS. Why is that so big? Okay? The real difference is rainfall patterns and temperatures. And it's if you think that we have a refugee problem today, you wait to see what it's like when the whole of northern Africa and northern Central Africa
turns into a desert.
Turns into a desert.
Yeah.
You wait. What are we going to do? We're going to build a wall all the way down southern Europe. And that gets people tend to understand that it's about your own personal well-being. Anybody who has had the privilege of traveling in Africa knows that today there is an inexhaustible supply of people who would like to come to Europe. It's perfectly normal. That's what I'd be doing if I was in Chad. Yes. That's clear. You wait till the population doubles by 2045, and then the agriculture production halves. You wait till we've got a problem. So that's one side of it. Okay. The other side of it is that with the renewable revolution that Europe has engineered, we can now produce, and in 10 years we'll be able to produce PV and wind and many other technologies that are pretty much, I reckon, half the cost of traditional electricity, thermal electricity. So we can do this in a way that actually creates a hell of a lot of jobs in Europe. We export, what, about 5% of our GDP, something like that, in energy costs for oil and gas and stuff, okay? We can change that into jobs at home. At the same time, we can lower the cost of electricity prices to citizens. We can give them clean air. So we can do it. But the question is, I think, for policymakers and for people who are trying to persuade people, politicians at the end of the day, is you have to be able to explain this vision to people, that we can do this, and we can do it in a way that makes their life better. And yes, we have taken a hit in the last 5 years because our electricity prices have gone up. And I know in Spain, I've got a small apartment in Spain, and my electricity bills are not very funny at the moment. But I'm rich, okay, compared to many people. And if we keep doing this, we are going to lose their support. So we have to do this in a way that's going to create jobs and show people it creates jobs and gets prices down. We have to say that, okay, we've hit the top, now we're going to go down. We're going to create jobs and we're going to get prices low, and it's possible.
Hey, how can we start reducing prices, as Christopher is suggesting? Because you cannot keep on subsidizing forever, you know, poor people, for example.
No, the fact is that, as I was saying, the new installations in Spain will not have any incentives, not probably in our old...
But is that sustainable?
Well, that is sustainable if something happens that we have been advocating for a long time, which is the price of electricity doesn't have to be very high, but it has to reflect the cost of the impact that electricity production does on the environment and the climate. If for many, many years, since we have the marginal design in the market, we have these prices have not been reflecting the externalities of the production of electricity. For many years, CO2 was not a cost. Yeah. Not even NOx, SOx, particles,
as well as nuclear, for example, the waste, for example.
Nuclear waste. So nowadays, society understands, especially in cities, that energy has bad effects, like pollution, and wants politicians to tackle this problem. So, but the problem for the politicians is that now that we have all the infrastructure is designed for using fossil fuels, it's very difficult to move slowly but progressively away from this without people starting to think, well, there are costs in this change. But if we don't do it, the cost of energy will continue rising because fossil fuels will continue to rise the prices. At some point, sometimes they fall and sometimes they go up. But the question is that probably they will go, if you don't do anything, they will just go ahead, and because there will be more demand from all over the world. And we will, in Europe especially, we are very vulnerable to geopolitics in fossil fuels because we don't have them. Yeah. We had them in the North Sea, now we have offshore in the North Sea, which is an interesting transition. But we don't have them. We have engineers, we have gray cells that we can use. We have to tell our children that this is what they have to do.
Aurélie, you also mentioned that the price of solar is coming down very fast. You mentioned 3 cents per kilowatt hour and then achieving 2 cents. Is this sustainable too?
Yes, it is. I mean, I think...
Atenção ao som aqui à Aurélie, por favor.
Coming back on what was said earlier as well, I think we miss the crucial parameter. First, I'm always amazed. Yeah, the sound maybe...
O som não está bem, da Aurélie, por favor, senão não se ouve lá atrás.
Try to speak louder.
Well, you don't want you to lose your voice.
Thank you. So yes, I'm always amazed. We always challenge us on our costs because it's true. Wind and solar, we compete, but we are friends in the end. But I mean, look at the other cost. For God's sake. It's incredible. It is sustainable. We have to implement a lot of stuff. It's just that. And we need political courage. And one thing that Christopher said, and I fully agree, the European Union has strong ambitions and will not bail out. But if you look at each member state singularly, more and more short-term is more important than long-term, because short-term is what will get you elected. Yeah. And one thing that you said, the migration angle, maybe we should push it more, because it seems that today it's much more fashionable than talking about climate change. One thing we missed, also putting apart the auctions. Of course, every investor needs to recover its cost. What is sure is that a lot of value, as we see it, is going to come from the downstream. So maybe you will not make so much money with these big power plants you'll put in place, but you will make a lot of money developing service, developing innovation, digitalization, and this is why when it comes to solar, we look very much into sector coupling, linking together in order to foster this decarbonation across all sectors, put more solar on the buildings, develop more EVs, and here again, at European level, that was such a fight against member states, against the construction sector, to get real requirements where you put in place clean energy and electromobility, etc., etc. And one last thing is really, the grids were mentioned. The grids are also a key part of making the whole system cheaper, and they are lagging behind so much in Europe today. And one thing we always discuss, it's almost laughable, but for example, today, you subsidize renewable energy. So each consumer will take a bit of money out of his pocket, electricity consumer, in order to finance the energy transition. But then the grids are not ready. So what happens most of the time? You curtail it. But then this curtailed energy, you will impact the visibility of investors. You have to remunerate it, because if you don't know if you're going to produce or going to be cut here and there, at least you need 100% remuneration. So there you go. So we finance it, and the same kilowatt hour, we curtail it, and then we compensate it 100%. You have already paid twice the same kilowatt hour. And then you add to this capacity markets, the fact that we don't have the grid, and then now we say we need to finance conventional assets, something that's very questionable in some markets, more understandable in other markets, but basically there is an immense economic inefficiency that we have to deal with.
Christopher, coming back to the grid, this is one of the main challenges we face in Europe. And it's not technical ones, and it's not investment ones, it's political ones. Especially because you have differences between countries, and not all of them are interested in implementing these changes. How can we overcome this?
The real problem with grids is neither of those. It's nobody wants to have a new overhead line over their house, and no politician has ever got elected by building one. Yeah. It's that simple. And that is the real challenge. If you look, for example, about, let's take Germany, okay? And let's talk about fit for purpose. Now, in Germany should be two price zones. So Germany, because there's congestion between the north and the south, logically, the price in the south should, and all the generation is in the north, all the windmills are in the north, okay? In the south, there's all the consumption, there's the cars, and you should have two price zones in order to pull production down to the south. But of course, Germany doesn't want to. And that is why Germany wanted to build a motorway, electricity motorway, from north to south, which you've got to do, okay? Because we're only at the start of this. There's no way in Northern Europe we are going to meet what we need to do in terms of renewables without building 200 gigawatts in the North Sea. It's that simple. It's just not going to happen, okay? When you add 200 gigawatts to the North Sea, you've got this huge amount of electricity sloshing around at the top of Europe, and all the consumption in the banana belt underneath it. Yeah. So unless we build those lines, there's no point in having those, because you'll have to deconnect them from the grid, basically, okay? So we are going to have to take a different approach of it. It will be partly governments explaining to citizens why this needs to happen, but it will be partly undergrounding at the end of the day. And this is a societal cost that we're going to have to take. And there is a reason why the European Union said, okay, last time our Connecting Europe facility was 5.6, the next time it should be 8.5. Yeah. Again, important to Portugal. Because Portugal, for example, needs to be better connected to Spain. Spain needs to be better connected to France. Yeah. You ain't never going to build electricity pylons across the Pyrenees over vineyards unless you underground quite a bit of it.
So it's going to be a huge cost.
So it's going to be a huge cost and a huge challenge. So it's a very difficult balance at the end of the day, isn't it? How do you respect the legitimate needs, wants of citizens not to look at a new electricity cable, and the cost to our citizens of the cost of undergrounding, which is big. It's more than double. Okay? Again, it's a technological challenge as well. We need to get the cost of DC, high voltage cables down.
Would you favor expansion of the producers from the north to the south, or you're comfortable with the idea that you can create a highway, energy highway, connecting consumers to producers in the north?
Well, I'm not sure you could build much offshore wind in the centre of Europe. You could try.
Yeah, no, but when you mentioned the case of Germany,
sorry, I was not answering your question fairly,
okay.
Was I? I think you've got to price it. You've got to price it. But I'm also convinced it's going to be more and more difficult to build a lot more onshore wind in countries like Germany. Spain is blessed with many areas where it is of limited population. Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium is not.
It's a problem.
And so there's huge potential in upgrading existing facilities. There's huge potential in investing more. But for me, there's two reasons why large-scale offshore wind is very attractive. Firstly, the load factors are absolutely fabulous. Yeah. And secondly, they're not onshore.
Bom, vamos abrir aqui agora o debate ao público. Quem quiser intervir, colocar questões ou mesmo fazer sugestões e comentar aqui as apresentações feitas, é só levantar a mão e identificar-se. Temos aqui microfones na sala. Então, ninguém quer colocar questões? Está ali ao fundo, à esquerda, geograficamente falando.
Good morning. My name is João Jonas de Mel. I teach at the University of Lisbon, environmental engineering, and I've been dealing with energy and environmental issues for a long time. My question is, I learned a lot this morning. That's not my question, just a statement. But my question is that why have we talked so little about energy efficiency? Because it is by far the largest source of energy that we have at a much lower cost than anything that has been discussed here today. I should say that I'm quite in favor of the renewable energy transition. It's something that we really need, so I will agree with you on that. And it seems to me it would be made much easier if we really put our money where our mouth is, which energy efficiency has been on programs and strategies for decades, and it is happening at a much too slow pace because it has been much less incentivized than any form of energy. I agree with you that all forms of energy have received incentives, more the I'd say high-impact sources than renewables such as sun and wind. But energy efficiency has really been the poor member of the family. Why? And why are not we talking about it?
Heikki, want to start? So
it's a challenge. The energy efficiency, first of all, because it's difficult to monetize it. To make it economically interesting. For companies, it's obvious that if you have, most companies, if you have to, you get the payback period is too long, then you don't make the effort because you don't know how long you're going to be around as a company. And as a citizen, citizens like the idea of energy efficiency, they like the idea of having less, to pay less in the bills. But you have to make it very easy for them to achieve these reductions. Because if the alternative is, I'm going to renovate your house, and you're going to have these workers around your house for about 6 months, and you will have to pay for this. We will decharge this from your bill or whatever. People start thinking, I don't want to have workers for about 6 months around my house, coming in, coming out. It's dirty, and so on and so on. It's very uncomfortable. This is a major problem. On theory, energy efficiency, when it comes, for instance, for designing things, it's very good. I mean, we know that TVs, refrigerators, everything. I changed all my white sets in the house in the last 2 years, and my electricity consumption has gone down like 40%. It's amazing. I realized how much I can, just because they were 10 years or 12 years old, so the technology has improved. But it has to be easy, and the cost has not to be very high, because otherwise people are not very happy if they don't realize in a short term the benefits of energy efficiency. This is a challenge.
Time to savings.
Yes.
What do you call time to savings? Yeah.
One thing that we are analyzing very carefully is the fact that how much energy you can save by changing from combustion cars to electricity cars. There you have a lot of energy efficiency also, not just the fact that you don't emit CO2, not at least where in the consumption phase when you're driving around the car. But then it's much more efficient. The electrical motor is much more efficient than the combustion motor. And if you combine it with renewables, then you have a very important reduction in primary energy consumption. Also, it's very interesting what I was saying about using gray cells. There's a company in Germany, I will not make any marketing, but they just came out with a car that has solar panels on it, and it has an autonomy of about 30 kilometers in summer in Germany. I can't imagine what will be that in Spain or in Portugal with solar panels.
You could do most of your driving in cities just
yes,
with that,
exactly.
with the panels. Yeah.
So this is an example where you have a very big energy combination of very efficient electric motor and the renewables, changing completely the paradigm of how it is working, because it becomes almost an autonomous energy unit which can move you around, which I think is probably going to be the future, especially in countries where there's a lot of solar power.
Chris, what about your take on that?
I'd just like to say thank you. I would personally have spoken at least 15 minutes about renewable energy, but about energy efficiency, but Antonio would have killed me because it's a renewables conference. But you're absolutely right, energy efficiency first. But what you say is what I call the MIL FIL factor. Energy efficiency at the end of the day is a lot about refurbishing your building, okay? And it's your mother-in-law, father-in-law factor, which is if you refurbish your building, you've got to go and live with your mother-in-law and your father-in-law for 6 months, which is good enough reason for most of us not to refurbish your building. But at the end of the day, no, the question is, so one of the things I was responsible for when I was head of cabinet responsible for energy, it was me who persuaded the commissioner to put into law the prohibition of incandescent light bulbs. We got 22,000 letters on that.
22,000?
Yeah. And it's the first time the European Union has ever prohibited anybody from doing anything apart from on the grounds of public health and public security. So, okay, let's do a little test with everybody here, okay? You all green. You believe in this, okay? There's a referendum tomorrow that says we are going to adopt a law which says you may not resell or rent your house unless you have converted it into a zero-carbon building, right? Put your hand up if you'd vote for that referendum. But then how on earth are we going to decarbonise our buildings? Come on, folks.
Thank you, Chris. António estava a sinalizar que havia aqui uma pessoa que queria colocar uma questão, não é? Aqui para baixo.
Sir, Paiva Technic. I'd like to congratulate Professor Jones for his magnificent slide. I love that slide. Can I have it? Ah, thank you. Well, my comment is this. We need a huge investment to build a super grid. We have to build a super grid. And we also have to invest a lot in storage. These are, in my opinion, also efficiency, of course. But efficiency, everybody is in agreement with efficiency by talking, because well, we like to spend. I mean, we don't like too much to not to spend. What we like is to spend. So a super grid covering the whole of Europe. Actually, there is a Chinese idea which I read on the Financial Times a little time ago, of building a super grid covering the whole world, at least Eurasia. I found it very interesting. So we have to spend a lot of money, invest in a super grid. We have to invest in storage, and then maybe we can get rid of fossil fuels. That's my point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mais questões ou statements? António? O António está-me a pedir para fechar agora, não é? Porque temos que ir para o coffee break. E eu quero pedir às pessoas para estarem de volta, imperativamente, às 11h... Ouviram bem? Imperativamente, o advérbio de modo, às 11h15, está bem? Obrigado.
Então, antes de saírem, eu queria dizer 3 coisas do ponto de vista logístico. Nós tentando inovar de conferência para conferência, eu esqueci-me de dizer ao princípio, nós temos ali o Daniel Perdigão, que já viram ali sim naquele canto, está ali, que está a fazer o registro gráfico da conferência hoje da parte da manhã, que depois será, portanto, ele será posto lá fora para que vejam o que é que, graficamente, uma pessoa que não é do setor vê daquilo que foi dito aqui. A segunda coisa que já foi dito, quer dizer, nós vamos ter, o Ministro da Economia não pode vir à abertura, vem mais tarde, portanto, convinha-me que nós cumpríssemos o horário quando ele está registrado. E terceira e última coisa tem a ver, nós fazemos este ano 30 anos. E para comemorar os 30 anos, resolvemos, na direção da APREN, fazer uma coisa que vocês têm todos aí. Este livro, que está nos vossos sacos, A Energia Viva da Terra, que tem um patrocínio de um conjunto de nossos associados, saiu hoje, foi entregue hoje às 7 da manhã aqui embaixo para estar distribuído a vós. É a nossa iniciativa para assinalar os 30 anos em que vamos distribuir gratuitamente em todas as escolas primárias do país. Vamos distribuir 4 exemplares por escola. A ação será diferente nas regiões autónomas dos Açores e da Madeira, em que iremos colaborar quer com a eletricidade dos Açores, quer com a empresa de eletricidade da Madeira, em fazer uma distribuição a outro nível nessas regiões autónomas. Foi aquilo que disse há bocadinho o Christopher. É preciso começar de pequenino a ensinar-lhes o que é energia, o que é que temos que fazer. Está aqui. Muito obrigado.
Onze e 15.